Hey, welcome into the show, everybody. This is Breaking the Huddle. I'm Joel Klatt. This show, as always, is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. It is the one fans deserve. All right, we got a national championship game to preview here. TCU and Georgia, SoFi Stadium next Monday night. Can't wait for this game. And let's be honest, right? Like, TCU being in this game is wild. Wild. We have just not seen this very often in college football. College football is not built for a Cinderella story. In fact, we haven't seen a national champ that started the season unranked since 1990. That was a Georgia Tech team that shared the national championship with the University of Colorado. So this TCU team trying to do something that is just not that common. And I got to tell you, we're all here for it, in particular after those great games last weekend in the college football semifinals. I hope we get an equal game in this national championship game. So let me start by breaking down first when Georgia has the ball. And I want to do this. So next segment, we'll break down when TCU has the ball. But I want to show you what these teams are, what makes them tick. And the first thing that you have to understand when Georgia has the ball is that Georgia is much more balanced than you think. In fact, there's only 4 teams in the country that throw the ball for over 265 yards and run the ball for also 200 yards. Those 4, by the way, 2 of them are in this game, TCU and Georgia. The other 2 are Oregon and Florida State. So Georgia is a very balanced team. Well, in order to be balanced, I believe that you've got to have hybrid-style players, in particular at that H-back or tight end spot, okay? Because you've got to be able to, out of the same personnel group, run the ball effectively and throw the ball effectively, and in times even explosively when you're trying to throw the football. Well, guess what Georgia has? Brock Bowers. And I know that he's probably their best player, but to some degree, he doesn't even get the attention that he maybe deserves for what he does to their offense. Let me show you exactly what I mean. A great tight end, what can he do for the offense? Well, first and foremost, he's got to be able to block. Right here, Brock Bowers is at the point of a bunch set here on the left side. He's got to get this in man on the line of scrimmage blocked, and then he does this. He wins and turns him inside, allowing the back to jump outside. See, the free hat for the defense is actually inside. The safety steps up in the correct spot, and guess what Bowers does? He takes the in-man on the line of scrimmage, who his entire job is to keep his outside arm free, and he takes that outside arm and mashes it down and mashes him down inside. That's great stuff. Right now, listen, there are guys that can do that. There's no doubt. They're blocking specialists as tight ends, and I hear about them all the time. It's like, hey, this guy, he gets after it in run blocking. He's our blocking tight end. Well, it's not often that that blocking tight end then becomes your biggest weapon for an explosive pass play. That's what Bowers can also do for you. This is what makes him such a good player. Let's look at the tape. Let's go back to that SEC championship game. Now you've got Bowers totally split out as a wide receiver. But it's not just window dressing because he understands the nuance and timing and spacing of routes. First, he outside releases just ever so slightly, kind of push release in order to get this seam. So that slow release, that little nuance creates the space. Then he takes off on the slant. It's an easy completion for Stetson Bennett, and it's an explosive play for Georgia. All because he understands the little nuances. He didn't panic and run and get inside there and then close down the window on his own. He takes his time. He comes off the line of scrimmage. He gives a little bit of a push release and then attacks inside. So he understands the nuance of zone. But then it's not just about zone, right? Because even slow guys can win against zone. You've got to be fast, though, to win against man, and he can do that as well. Check out this next play. Same game. Now he's in line, okay? So Bowers, here's our guy. He's in line, in tight end, and they're trying to run man coverage outside LSU is. Well, guess what? He's running right by linebackers. So he beats the linebacker right down the middle of the field. Bennett sees him, and boom, he delivers an accurate pass. So, yes, does Bennett have to deliver an accurate pass on time? Yes, absolutely. And Bennett plays well, and he has played well against top 15 teams, top 5 teams, you know, big games, right? But he's got weapons, and namely Bowers. Bowers makes everything go for Georgia offensively because he gives them the ability to be balanced. Run the ball, throw the ball, and then even throw the ball explosively. So that's what TCU is going to have to face. So what do they do? Well, defensively, TCU is really about speed, all right, and then taking advantage of opportunities. Their speed is actually really good. And one of the things that they do is that they attack immediately. Right when they diagnose a play, they're not kind of sliding over, but their linebackers are going. They run a 3-3-5 defense. Those three defensive linemen are there to just create stalemates at the line of scrimmage so the linebackers can fast flow quickly, get over the top, and stop the run. They did that very well against Michigan. They've done it well all year long. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. This is against Texas. Bijan Robinson, one of the best backs in the country. Here's your three linemen. Texas has 8 guys to block 7. You should not be able to stop the run, but look at how fast they flow over the top. So stalemates at the defensive line, then the linebackers are flow, and a safety comes up, and now all of a sudden you've equated numbers before Bijan Robinson can even get to the line of scrimmage. That's very difficult to do because, again, by the numbers, Texas has the play. That's a play that if I'm a play caller, if I'm Steve Sarkisian, if I'm any play caller, I'm like, boom, run it. We've got them. And then they still succeeded because of the stalemate up front and the fast flow over the top. So that's how they stop the run. Let's take a look now at how they get maybe some pressure on the quarterback. Well, they're going to blitz everybody, blitz one more than they can block. But in order to do that, you've got to be patient on the outside. And guess what? Man coverage, they switch off the release as to not give a free quick completion right away. That's a beautiful job of being patient by the corner and the safety. Okay, so what happened there is that the corner knows that he's got the outside release. It doesn't mean that he's got the outside player. He's got whichever of that bunch set is going to come to him. The safety who's inside understands that he doesn't have the number 2 wide receiver. He's got the number 2 release. It's a little nuance to understand that their patience takes away the quick throw. When you take away the quick throw, then that zero pressure, zero meaning no safety in the back end, that zero pressure can get home to the quarterback. If they tried to switch that and the corner ran out and then all of a sudden there's an out route, guess what? The quarterback still gets hit, but that ball is going to be out. All right? Then it's not just man coverage. They also do a great job of reading and reacting in the passing game with kind of hybrid style players. So watch back here. So at the snap, you've got a linebacker backed up and a safety kind of down. Well, what are those two guys doing sitting in the middle of the field? Well, the linebacker screams down on play action pass. The safety sits, and now the quarterback can't throw the flat route. He can't throw the over route. Why? Because guys are just sitting there with their eyes in the backfield. Okay, so TCU runs a lot of different things, and Coach Gillespie does a really good job on the defensive side. So this is not a team that's just going to lay down. They're going to have opportunities to stop Georgia at times. They're going to have to deal with Brock Bowers, there's no doubt, but it should be a phenomenal matchup. That's what those two teams do on those two sides of the ball. When we come back, let's take a look at what TCU does on offense so well and how Georgia could combat that with their great defense. That's coming straight up. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at the TCU offense now and how they match up with the Georgia defense. First, let's take a look at this offense. And really, you know, this offense led by Max Duggan, Quentin Johnston on the outside, Kendre Miller, DeMarcado. This is a really good offense. It's one of the most balanced offenses in the country, and it's also one of the most explosive offenses in the country. Keep in mind now, this is a team that can create fast touchdowns. In fact, they've got 21 plays so far this season of over 50 yards. Not just 20 yards, right? Normal explosive plays, but like the super explosive plays. 50 yards. How do they do that? Well, they've got a quarterback that can run. They've got a wide receiver that might be the number 1 wide receiver taken in the NFL draft. They've got a really good back. They've got a really good offensive line. Let me show you how they attack teams, and it's really in a number of different ways. First and foremost here, what you're going to see is they've only got 5 guys to block 6. So they need to recruit their quarterback into the run scheme by running this zone read. So now this defensive end's got to take the quarterback, and what happens? A little bit of a gash right there, and there's DeMarcado, boom. And you see the speed. This is one thing that TCU has that I think might take Georgia by surprise. TCU is fast, very fast. I think it's probably the best team trait that they have, both offensively and defensively, is their speed. I showed you their defensive speed at linebacker and safety, their fast flow over the top. Well, their offense equally as fast, okay? And the guy on the outside is a matchup nightmare, and this is one of the things you have to have in order to beat Georgia. They're going to have to sit there and take shots. All right, so let's take a look at this next play. When you've got a one-on-one on the outside with Quentin Johnston, Max Duggan is going to have to take and win shots. Duggan's one of the most accurate passers in the country when he's throwing the ball 20 yards or more down the field. Quentin Johnston has to have a huge game. It brings me to really the two keys for TCU on offense. In order to beat Georgia, your wide receiver has to be great. He's got to win one-on-ones. So Quentin Johnston's going to have to win one-on-ones on the outside. It's one of the things that Marvin Harrison was able to do in that game against Ohio State and Georgia. And I think Quentin Johnston is going to have to win the one-on-ones on the outside. He's got to create big plays and manipulate the coverage so that they can maybe run the football, that maybe they can get somebody else open going down the field. So that's huge. And then the next thing that they have to do, the quarterback has to exploit Georgia running the football. Max Duggan is going to have to play great. Now, granted, obviously you can't turn the ball over. You're going to have to hit the shots when they're there. But then as we saw with C.J. Stroud in that semifinal, when it's available to run, you've got to hurt the Georgia defense. And guess what? The Georgia defense can be hurt by a quarterback that will take off. And I don't know if there's any better than Max Duggan in particular in big moments. There's guys that are maybe more athletic, but when you're talking about the combination of throwing the ball down the field from the pocket and the ability to run and just the gritty toughness that Max Duggan has, that competitive spirit, he might be the perfect guy to face Georgia. Those two things have to take place if TCU wants to stay close in this game. So what does Georgia do to combat all that? Well, this defense is so good. All right, the first thing that they do, this defense, is that they build a run wall with their defensive line. That defensive line allows them to play split safety a lot. They can keep their safeties back and stay safe in coverage. Keep guys over the top of players like Marvin Harrison or Quentin Johnston. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. In their game against Tennessee, Tennessee came in with a really good run game. But guess what? They had 6 guys in the box, 6 guys to block them. And yet, guess what? Stalemates across the board, and they stopped the run. You can't beat Georgia if you're going to get stalemated by 6 and 6. Okay, so that's one of their superpowers. What does that allow them to do? Keep their safeties back. They don't have to commit any safeties to the run defense because their defensive tackles are so good. So then what happens? Well, let's take a look at the SEC championship game. They've got 2 safeties back deep, okay? They can stay there. Then they can blitz and play heavy inside leverage with their outside linebacker. And as LSU's trying to throw a slant, it's nowhere to be found. And now the blitz gets there, they got to throw it away. So again, safe coverage, and they're very smart. That linebacker, that outside linebacker understands, or even nickel safety, whatever, whoever's in the game personnel-wise, he understands like, okay, guess what? I've got a blitz going over to my inside, and I've got safety help. Well, they're going to try to exploit the blitz, so he just plays heavy inside leverage. It's really smart stuff. They understand what they're trying to do, and it's really born. The genesis is from that defensive line. Last thing that I'll show you about this Georgia team is their coverage can help their pass rush. Their pass rush isn't dominant, but when their coverage locks on, forces the quarterback to pump and hold the ball, the rush can get there. All right, so when you're talking about those little moments, watch for Max Duggan's ability to throw the ball in rhythm on time. If he can do that, then he'll likely stay clean. But if he's having to double pump and then run around, it could be a different story with that rush getting home, and that's exactly how they were able to beat Tennessee. This is going to be a great game. I really do believe. I think it's going to be closer than the experts believe. I think it's going to be closer than the spread. Georgia probably wins this game. But I tell you what, I think we're in for an absolute treat. Georgia could be giving up some points. There could be some big plays down the field. And don't underestimate the heart of Max Duggan and that TCU team. All right, when we come back, I need to talk about TCU a little bit more broadly, in particular in the vein of, will we see this again? Well, I mean, it's TCU, the Cinderella. Are they a Cinderella? All of those things coming up. All right, welcome back to the program. Let's talk about this TCU team, because you can say it came out of nowhere, and yes, it did. Again, TCU is trying to become the first national champion that started the season unranked since 1990, and that's a long time. It's a totally different era of college football, completely different era of college football. The way that we view college football, recruiting rankings have become a thing, and so it's hard to even equate what's going on. I mean, to me, this is just like this is the first time we've seen this. And Sonny Dykes has done an outstanding job. But let's talk through a little bit about, like, what do we expect? Not in this game, but moving forward out of college football, because I actually think that this could become a little bit more prevalent than what we've seen in the past. Because in the past, there was one way to do this. One, recruit. You had to recruit. You had to recruit high school kids. You had to redshirt them. You had to develop some of them. Some of them had to be stars. And then eventually you had a roster that was more talented than everybody else. And what ended up happening is that the combination of that style and this 4-team invitational college football playoff ended up basically consolidating all of the talent into about 4 or 5, maybe 6 schools around the country, because they're the only ones that could make a solid argument to high school players that, like, you've got to come here in order to compete for a championship. And they weren't necessarily wrong. So the meaning was stripped out of college football. Well, now all of that is kind of changing, right? Because while we still have the 4-team invitational, now all of a sudden you can get really quality college players to come in and fill holes on rosters that maybe aren't as talented as those top 5 or 6. So what you see is drastic turnarounds across college football, by the way, not just TCU. Washington had a turnaround, mainly because of transfers, new coach. USC, huge turnaround for a similar reason. Colorado's trying to do that right now in the transfer portal. Michigan filled a huge hole on their offensive line, made a playoff run. The transfer portal is a massive deal, and it's totally changing the sport, and it's changing who can expect or hope to be in the college football playoff, and TCU is the evidence of that. When you look at this roster, the first thing that you've got to say is that Gary Patterson did an excellent job identifying talent, in particular speed. Now, it wasn't working out, okay? So it changes. Then Sonny Dykes comes in, and he identifies the very specific areas where they can go to get the help and the depth that they need to become a roster that can compete at the top end. So what do? Well, here's a few guys just for namesake. On the offensive side, a couple. Jared Wiley, the tight end, comes in from Texas. He's been their leading receiver as the tight end. Not for the team, but of the tight end group. Alon Ali comes from SMU with Sonny Dykes and is their center and anchors what is already a veteran offensive line group that was incumbent from the old coaching staff. And then all of a sudden, here they are. On the defensive side, they needed more help. They needed a lot of help from a depth perspective on the defensive line. They got 3 or 4 transfers on the defensive line to go along with Dylan Horton, who transferred in last year. They needed help at linebacker. They got Johnny Hodges from Navy. They needed help at safety. They got Mark Perry from Colorado, Josh Newton from ULM. Now all of a sudden, you become a team that, as a roster, you can compete. Well, then what do you need? You need to win close games. That's what you need. And they did that. So now I do believe that this is a point in time in college football that we're going to look back on and say, remember that TCU team? They were the first of what will become many teams that can turn it around, go sub 500, turn it around in the transfer portal, and then compete even in the playoff stage, and in particular when we move to a 12-team playoff. So this TCU team, remember this team. Because as long as we play a similar style of football and as long as these rules are what they are with a 12-team playoff coming and transfer portal, we're going to have teams that can turn it around and play at the top end. And I'm here for it. I can't wait to watch them play in the national championship game. All right, when we come back, a little Klatt back to finish things off here on Breaking the Huddle. Welcome back to the program. Let's get a little Klatt back, the final edition of Klatt back of the season here on Breaking the Huddle. Let's get out there. And first, I want to give you some context to a lot of the feedback that I got. I sent this tweet out after the Michigan and TCU game amongst a series of tweets. And it was basically saying that officiating is broken. Replay in college football is broken and targeting foul is equally broken. Clearly a TD in the first half. Yes, that's true. 100% targeting on that last play. Yes, that's also true. Officiating in college football needs an overhaul. No reason for every conference to have their own officials. Should have a national officiating base. Stand by that 100%. Didn't say it won the game for either team, but all of those things that I tweeted were true. And then then the responses came in, and they were obviously beautiful, so let's check a couple of them out. Freddie, the pizza man, says, reading your tweet a few times. Thanks for reading it a few times. Still looking for the part where it says, credit to TCU for playing a great game when no one picked them to win. Maybe you have it in another tweet. I'll check. Weird, because I didn't see another tweet from you after checking, so let's check together. Shall we, Freddie? Oh, what do we see here? The tweet before the one that you read, quote, several times says, fantastic college football game. TCU played a great game. Duggan was sensational. By the way, first bullet point, TCU, run game and run D was terrific. So how do you read the one tweet several times, but not the one that was sent 3 minutes before it? Freddie, are you kidding me? I'll check. We checked for you, pizza man. Unbelievable. Keep tossing those pies. Let's go back to the Twitter sphere. All right. What is this one? Machine gun legs 21. Is that what it says? All right. Whatever. It says, how about the fact that Alabama looked better than all 4 teams, Joel? All right, machine gun. They also played Kansas State, who was unquestionably a weaker team than any of the 4 teams that played in the college football playoff. And there is no college football fan on the face of the planet that can watch those 2 college football games and say, oh, yeah, the committee got it wrong. Sorry, Alabama lost twice. If you don't want this discussion, win the games. Win the games. That's going to do it. For this year's edition of Breaking the Huddle, I want to thank Dr. Pepper for all of their support. Remember, Dr. Pepper, it is the one fans deserve. We'll be back next year, folks, with Breaking the Huddle. And always remember, go to wherever you get your podcasts and check out The Joel Klatt Show.